Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started here in a minute. If you can hear us out there, please let us know where you're coming from. We're excited to chat today. As you know, the webinar is about strategies to grow your finance career and get promoted. So we're excited to share some of our thoughts and see how we can help you. So please, if you're out there listening, just let us know where you're calling in from, where you've joined us from. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with our little fun countdown we like to do. So bear with me for a moment. All right, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that countdown as much as Ron did. Ron loves the countdown. So let's see. Let's see if we can come up with the good joke. What does a spouse look for? What does a statistician look for in a spouse? Ron, any ideas?
Yeah, I think I've heard this joke a few times. So why don't you tell it?
A normal distribution. Ta-ting! All right. So if you're out there and you're listening, please let us know where you're coming from. We'd love to know what location you're coming from. I'm going to go ahead and share our presentation. Give me one moment here. All right, let me bring up the actual deck. You're probably seeing an email right now. Seeing the deck, Ron?
I'm seeing it. Yeah, perfect.
All right, perfect. All right, so if you're out there again, just let us know where you're calling in from. Today's webinar that Ron and I are doing is strategies to grow your finance career and get promoted. So if you want to get promoted or grow your career, then you're in the right event. But let us know in the chat what you'd like us to cover. And make sure you stay till the end. We'll have a special offer for everybody. So we're excited to share that. Welcome from Nigeria. Appreciate you joining us. We'll see what other locations we get today. All right. Ron, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, fantastic. So Ron Monteiro, I'm AKA the storytelling guy. So I'm a BCom, Bachelor of Commerce, and I have my CPA. I worked for 15 years in FP&A capacities at Kraft Foods, Campbell Soup, Kruger Products, and another 5 years in other finance roles in different companies. And what I do now for a living is I do a lot of training with Paul, work with many companies around the world, coaching, speaking, and I have a small little podcast that I do. So really excited to share our knowledge on growing our careers.
Thank you. Appreciate that for the introduction, Ron. And my name is Paul Barnhurst. I work with Ron quite a bit. I go by the nickname the FP&A guy because I'm not as good at storytelling as Ron. So I had to come up with something that would work for me. I've been doing my own business now for over 2 years. Before that, I worked in FP&A, probably like many of you attending, worked for DigiCert, Solera, American Express. I host 3 podcasts today. So we got Financial Modeler's Corner, which you can guess all about financial modeling, FP&A Tomorrow, all about what makes great FP&A. And then the third one is called Future Finance, as we've all seen over the last year how AI and technology is changing things. We're going to talk about how that's shaping the future of finance, and I do that with Glenn Hopper. Then I'm fortunate enough to do a lot of training with Ron, and in general, I just like to listen to myself talk, so you'll get to hear me talk a lot. So that's a little about me. Ron's laughing because he knows it's true, unless I'm playing on my phone. All right. So why don't you cue this one up? I know you love this image, Ron.
Yeah, no, and I think the image, what we want to stress on this is leadership and careers are very much like a fingerprint. Everybody's different. Everybody's career is different. Everybody's aspirations are different. So I know the topic here is about being promoted, but look, if you feel like you're in a role where you love the level, all good, right? I think there's some great learning no matter what, but every career is different. But what we always say, it's about taking control of that career, right? What's the intention? And what are some very tangible steps to improve, right? That's where we really want to move forward with.
And I love that. I mean, I've seen the people that they're at an analyst or a manager level, and they're like, look, it gives me the freedom to be with my kids when I need to, not feel like I got to travel. And yeah, do they get paid as much as for another role? No, but are they fulfilled? If they're fulfilled, they are fulfilled and happy. That's what matters. Now, I'm guessing if I asked, the group we have out there, some of you want to be a CFO, some of you, maybe the level is manager, VP, director. Some may want to totally change careers, and all of that's okay. We're not here to tell you what you need to do in your career. We're here to just share some of our thoughts. So again, as we go through this, let us know where you're coming from and let us know what questions you have.
Yeah, and just building on what Paul said, I think it's having an intention for this webinar. So what do you want to be promoted within your current company? Do you want to move to a different company? Do you want to start your own businesses like Paul and myself? And that's where that intention, it's really around what are the things you can take from this webinar to make a tangible step forward, right? Knowing this is a long-term journey.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, I was going to say, and I want to just share one thing with that. I don't know if you get it much, Ron, but I get asked all the time from people on LinkedIn, help me with my career. It's often wanting to make a career switch and often like, hey, can I come work for you? Or can you find me a job? We're going to talk about tangible skills that go beyond that. Generally, when that's all you do, you send someone, hey, I'll work for you free or find me a job. It doesn't do you any good. The important thing to remember as we talk about your career, whether it's finding a job, getting promoted, changing, whatever it might be, it's like Ron said, being intentional. And with every person you contact, having a purpose with the people you reach out to, not just a general, hey, I hope they can help me, but what exactly do you need? Research those people. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we talk about this, because I get asked all the time, and I'm much more likely, and this will be true of everybody out there, to help somebody that really has an idea, a plan, even if that idea or plan is, I need some guidance, I need help, but they can specifically say, here's why I need help. The more specific they are and intentional in all of this, the better you're going to do. I guess that's really the line is, the intentionality isn't just being intentional in the job you want, it's being intentional with the people you talk to, the interactions, and making sure they're valuable for both sides of that communication.
Fantastic. Welcome, Mo from Detroit. Love that you're joining us. Thank you. And what we're going to do is we have a slide essentially for each of these seven, right? So become an expert in the business, find a coach or mentor, build a brand outside of work, build relationships, act like you are in the job you want, right? There's a school of thought saying, hey, if you want the next level up, bring that same approach. Sharpen your communication, and last but not least, influence without authority. And as we go through each one of them, send us any questions, your thoughts. We love learning from participants as well. So if you have another strategy and say, hey, I've tried this and it's worked, or it hasn't worked, feel free to share. Okay, so we'll start with becoming an expert in the business. And the funny thing is, I was looking for essentially a cheese tray, but I think I found a bunch of appetizers here. And I work for Kraft, and I actually worked on the cheese business a fair amount at Kraft Foods. And a couple of things I learned, because my previous job was actually an accountant at Hitachi, where it was very much go in, do the job as prescribed, and leave at 5 o'clock. It was very much a 9 to 5, stay in your career for the rest, stay in your job for many, many years and not progress. Whereas Kraft was very different. And I really credit the leadership and approach there that helped shape my career and changed me forever. So in this particular example, become an expert in the business. I used to see this one person. He was a marketing person and he just flew up the corporate ladder. He used to go into his physical office and literally study the business for a week. He wouldn't get out. He basically maybe just take bathroom breaks. He'd come out by the end of the week an expert in the numbers, so to speak. So I say the first thing to do, really understand your business from a numbers perspective, the P&L, the balance sheet, the divisions within your particular business. So in this case, I had a whole bunch of cheese segments: natural cheese, processed cheese, cream cheese. I knew the revenue, the profit, and many other metrics inside out. And then when you have discussions with your business partners, you become that expert. And then what I'd say is to complement that, you take that much further and say, how do I go visit the factories? How do I go out with sales? How do I even go do it? Like I visited a marketing commercial shoot. So you're understanding the business from a 360-degree lens. And many of us in finance, we're so busy, we end up staying all in our cube and in our spreadsheets. So I really believe it's like start with that, become an expert in the business, but then get out there and really learn the business from many sides. And it was a game, it was a complete transformative experience for me. And I employed that throughout my career and it served me well. Paul, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, the one thing I want to, well, two thoughts. First, I'm going to share an experience that a couple of years ago, actually about a year ago, I got reached out to by a specific firm saying, "Hey, we want to pay you some, really high number for your time. You've been recommended by name." And so I'd worked in finance for a company for about 5 years, and they wanted me to talk about some of that experience, to answer questions about the industry. And I was asked for by name because I was seen as an expert. And that's because when I worked there, I made sure I learned the business really well. I made sure I dug into things. I didn't just do finance, but I said, okay, how does product work? How does customer support work? What are our pain points? What are our numbers? What's as much as I could absorbing how the operations work, because that's in it is invaluable to have a good finance or FP&A person that knows the business. I mean, even in accounting, it's very valuable. Yes, you may not be involved in strategy, but the better you know the business, the easier it is for you to tell if a journal entry is wrong. To say if something doesn't look right when you look at the P&L versus, oh, I know my debits and credits. So I'd say to anyone in finance, really learn the business. So that's one experience. And then the other is in the job I had is I started getting asked all kinds of questions. Call Paul, he'll know. And they weren't just finance questions. They were questions about product and business. And I could have great conversations and it opened up opportunity. All right. So I got a question from Mo. Yeah, so it's a great question. And we'll touch on that here in a minute. Let us kind of run through these. And if you don't mind, we'll touch a little bit more on toward the end. But he's asking about jumping to a different company. There's pros and cons, nothing wrong with it. I mean, I've worked for multiple companies. Ron has as well. And so it's really kind of figuring out what makes sense for your career. And we will touch on that here a little bit. So hold that for a moment. But keep the questions coming. And I think this touches a little bit on what you're talking about of jumping to different companies. I encourage everybody to have a coach and or mentor. And in an ideal scenario, it's good to have somebody outside your existing company. You do have a boss, or you have people that can help you, but that can give that outside view. And something I really liked when you think of a coach and or a mentor, I had a boss who was one of my best, was a great mentor for me. I still remember him saying, Paul, he's like, you always need to keep your options open. Like, I don't want to lose you. I'm not saying leave, but he's like, you should always be looking. And his rationale was basically, look, the company could let you go tomorrow, right? They have no loyalty or tie to you. That's how business works nowadays. When there's reorgs, anyone's at risk. So he's like, always be exploring your options. And that was some great mentoring advice I got, because it meant always be focusing on that network, always be thinking and building relationships outside of work, even if you're happy. So I'll let you add a little bit to this one, Ron, and then I have one thing
Yeah,
at
no,
the end.
and that's a very intriguing point to me because I do agree with you. It's important to understand the landscape, continue to build the network, but I would say not with one foot out the door unless you're actively
Sure.
looking, right?
Yeah,
So
no, I agree.
I really believe it's like trying to find an environment where you're super happy with, but understanding that, as Paul said, business could change. There could be a merger and acquisition, layoffs, a round of layoffs, but for me, it's not about just constantly looking to the next job. It's about doing great in your current job and
Mhm.
also having an outside perspective, which I love. And building on this one, so I'll give you a story. So I was in my career, I was at the manager level, and I wanted to get to the senior manager level. And I was basically told, in a positive, constructive way, Ron, you don't have any presence in executive rooms. You're very quiet often. And I got a lot of very direct feedback that honestly hit me pretty hard when I first got it. But what was amazing about that company, and it was craft, is they actually paired me up with a coach. And I had a development plan to work on my presence. And it was as simple as even, hey, Ron, commit to saying at least one thing in every meeting. And what's important is it's not about those giant steps, it's about those little things you can do a little differently. And so what happened is I started speaking in every meeting, and I became more and more confident, more and more comfortable speaking. And I also had that accountability partner. So my boss and my coach would be, hey, how's that going? And my boss was frequently in meetings and would be like, oh, cool. I love how you contributed to that. Or, hey, Ron, you're a little bit quiet. So remember that agreement we had? So again, a lot of people who maybe have been there, done that can help you get to where you want to go. So I'm a huge believer in being very intentional with finding a coach and or mentor.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think my point is not one foot out the door. Is that you should not close down opportunities. You should
Yeah.
always be willing to listen and explore. And when it comes to learn how to network, building a network will be invaluable because there'll be times you need that. I mean, I know having a network has helped me, and we'll talk more about that with the next one on building your brand, but just having people you can rely on, you can talk to, you can get advice, even outside the formal mentor. If you're wanting to just have a sounding board, having that network is invaluable because you have different people you can reach out to for different needs. So, and networking is not what people think of, going to an event and giving everybody your business card. That's not networking. If you haven't read How to Win Friends and Influence People, great book to read. It's about learning people's names, showing genuine interest in others, and making it a win-win relationship. That's what true networking is. Not, do I have 100,000 followers on this platform?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's about listening and trying to see how you can help the other person, right? Which is not it's not just about, oh, what can I get out of this? It's about how can I help other people.
Yep. And so number 3 is, building a brand outside of work. And I get asked about this all the time because, I've built what I believe is a strong brand. I think many people recognize my logo, know who I am. I have people who don't know my name, but if someone says the FP&A guy, oh, I know who that is. That's the guy with the beard, right? But I share the brand outside of work, not to say you need to build a business. I had no intentions of building a business. It came about over time because it makes a difference. And I want to share 2 examples, and then I'll talk a little bit about how I think of building it, and then Ron can share his thoughts here. Is the first when it comes to building a brand. So there's this company I wanted to work for, and I applied to them, never heard back. Started my own business. Some things happened. I got to know the CEO personally. And I was thinking of potentially, hey, I'm going to talk to a couple companies, see if I want to do something. I send him an email, and by that afternoon, I had a response that he was interested in hiring me. That was the difference of 2 years. And that over those last 2 years, I had built a brand where this person started following me on LinkedIn and knew who I was. Now, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, yeah, I'll talk to you about potentially hiring you. Same with another company where before I really struggled to get a job. And so it doesn't mean that you need to be famous. It doesn't mean you need a big network. It means you need to find the ways to share your voice so that people will recognize your quality. And that can be through LinkedIn, that can be through any platform, a newsletter, a blog article, just going to events weekly in the community, whatever, monthly. There's a lot of different ways to do that. I often guess, well, how should I build a brand? And I tell everybody, find your voice in what you enjoy. Some people might might want to do a podcast. Some people might want to share some videos. Maybe they want to blog. Maybe they want to be on LinkedIn. Maybe like Twitter. Maybe they're really quiet and, they just want to be reading a lot and sharing maybe something they learned. But find a way to make sure you have a presence so that you're building beyond just your existing company, that you're getting known so that you're just prepared for whatever may come.
Yeah, and that's why it's been really cool to see Paul's brand building. And it's funny, I'm in Toronto, Canada, and I speak to a lot of CFOs here, and I'll frequently mention, hey, I work with a partner, and they're like, oh, that guy with the beard, the Paul Barnhurst guy. And it's because Paul is very intentional about building his brand with great content, right? So if you follow him on LinkedIn, you'll see that, right? You'll see lots of content. On the weekend, he posted something about top down and bottom up budgeting, right? And so it's hey, what can I do to post to help people in their current job, which is amazing.
Yep, and we could see there Mo saying he's gotten that feedback as well. It makes a difference. You'd be surprised. And I could share more opportunities. I mean, I tried to work for an FP&A tool forever and couldn't get any of the jobs. Now I've had more than a few try to hire me because I established a brand that I knew what their tools were. All right. Give me a second here. My clicker's not working. There we go. Go skydiving. That's anything else we need to add to this one, Ron, right? That's the message. Who hasn't
No,
done
I mean, there is something to like. It's about sometimes taking that big leap and going big. Go big or go home is another way of saying it, right? When you build relationships, it's like how do you solve the business partners? I'm not quite connecting the image, Paul, and I did it, but I think it is about in sync skydiving, and so what I first started in finance, I thought it was about my Excel models. I thought it was about my P&L understanding. I thought about all the technical aspects. And again, I quickly learned it really is about the strength of your relationships with your business partners, whether it's marketing, sales, supply chain, whether it's accounting, whether it's other finance folks. It really starts with great business partnership. Is about how can I solve pain points for my stakeholders. And in the context of getting promoted and moving up the corporate ladder, imagine you go to a person who's more senior in a sales or marketing role, and they have this process that's a pain in the butt for them. And you say, wow, I noticed that this is a painful area. How can I solve it? Imagine the trust you build. Imagine the points you build. And then you start becoming known as somebody who helps solve problems, has helped move the business forward and well beyond this, just the traditional reporting or bean counting, as some people talk about it. So the strength of the relationship is often a key determinant on whether you get considered for that promotion.
so true. And I mean, I'll give an example. I worked for a company and I think I spent 5 years as a manager, never got promoted to a director there. And in those 5 years, I never had less than a 1-2 rating. So never did I have an average rating. I had 1 year I got a 1-1 rating and it was ranked the #1 manager globally within that part of the company. I got a chairman's award, but I still never got promoted. Outside, yes, I did get an analyst. I got more responsibility. I took a lateral that ended up enough, a little more pay, but I was never promoted to a director. And I learned a lot from that it's not enough to just be good at your job. It's not enough to just deliver those results and sometimes going beyond. Whether you want to call it office politics, whatever you want to call it, I'm not saying get involved in politics. I'm not saying you get involved in gossip, but building relationships, both in and outside work, getting to know people, those things matter. And they matter a lot. Obviously, you first need to deliver good results. I'm never saying play politics and don't deliver good results. Don't misunderstand me. But relationships are more important than you think often. And I really learned that. And I've seen the difference it's made of now really building relationships and focusing more on solving those pain points, how it can help you in a career. And there's also something to be said for being, when we talk get promoted, that's one of the things we mentioned beyond building the relationships is knowing where those opportunities will come and what's important to getting promoted. I remember having a conversation with a boss and he's like, yeah, if you moved here, he goes, if you just told me you're going to move to New York, I could probably get you promoted within a month, which means I could have become a director, a level up and manage the team. And I was like, okay, let me think about this. And the way I analyzed it was, okay, I could make a little more money. I could drive farther to work, have more responsibility, live in a shoebox, be miserable because it wasn't a location I wanted to live in. Also, I could say I get promoted, or I could have an affordable mortgage, have a family that enjoyed where they were living, and acknowledge the fact that I'm going to have less responsibility and not going to have the promotion opportunity with this company. And so that's kind of just an example of what we talk about with getting promoted and knowing what you want. It was clear to me that, okay, yes, I can get the promoted if I'm willing to do that, but that's not what's best for me. A little bit of a side from number
Yeah,
4.
no, I
I
love
want
that.
to share that.
And Paul, it reminded me of the story where I was a director of finance at a company. And I was actually, it's funny enough, I was doing a leadership lecture at a university and I set up a networking breakfast with a former president of Craft Canada. And we just talked about leadership. I didn't even ask for a promotion. I actually had zero interest in working for that company. And at the end of the meeting, he said, look, I'd really like to bring you into our company. And I ended up getting a promotion out of it because I'd taken the initiative and asked for a networking meeting and had a genuine conversation with him. And I was truly interested in him. and I ended up getting a promotion out of it. So back to Paul's points around building relationships and networking, real life story of getting a promotion was I wasn't even looking for it, but I took that initiative and it worked out quite well. Okay, so this is one that's really interesting, and you've probably heard this before. That let's say you're an analyst, you want a manager, or you're a manager, you want a director, and so forth. One of the biggest strategies is really to say, look, if I'm in that chair, if I'm in the chair that I want, what does that person do differently than my current role? And I'll use an example. A lot of times, as a finance analyst, for example, you're rewarded on a lot of your individual contributor behavior, right? Like doing a great financial model or doing great analysis. And as you move to the manager, it becomes a little bit more tilted towards leadership, right? How do I influence a room? How do I, have some presence in meetings? And so if you were looking for the manager role at that point, imagine you go in and say, instead of, the traditional analyst approach, I'm going to go in and do that with excellence. So I'm not saying don't do that, as Paul said, but then add to it. Say, how do I provide recommendations in the meeting? How do I show some leadership? How do I show some initiative? And you could use that analogy, whatever level of the organization, but being very, very conscious to say, what do excellent people do at that level? And how do I start employing it right away? There's one time actually I was being considered for a VP position. I was given that very feedback saying, hey, we'd like to see more. And I just took it very seriously. And in those meetings, I was very much in like, how do I provide recommendations in the meeting? That was my intention in every single meeting in a very authentic way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It makes a difference when you start behaving and acting like the job you want. People notice because when they're looking to promote someone, they're trying to envision, can they do the job? And if you're showing in the job you're in that you can do that, if you're, leveling up and doing work that's often seen at a higher level, they're much more likely to say, "Oh, I'll pick that person," versus promoting somebody else. Again, not always, but a lot of times. And so this one here, sharpen your ability to communicate and influence others. And I shared an example, and I've shared this before when it comes to influencing. I still remember early in my career, there's something I wanted to implement. I thought it was a great idea. My boss had signed off and said, go for it. Shared it with the business, and I figured they would just sign off because it was a good idea. And they looked at me like, okay, you're stupid. Like, why are you wanting us to do this? And I look back now and a few things I realized. One, I never took time to really understand their perspective. I was young, dumb, and hungry, as I like to say, and hungry to show myself, prove myself. So I'm smart instead of really knowing what the business needed so I could influence. And they kind of laughed at the idea. It was never implemented. And as I look back now, I wouldn't even have recommended it. One, because it didn't make sense based on their needs, even though it may have been a good idea. It's really something I should have stepped back and think, okay, what are the changes we make that are best for them, best for us, that move everybody forward, instead of what do we finance think is best and everybody should get on board. And it was a real learning that influencing is an art, and it's a lot more than just communication or just storytelling or just being intelligent or even having a good idea. And when you're able to really influence without authority, which we have, we'll have an offer here at the end for you on that. It's amazing the opportunities that can come when you learn how to do that and learn the right way to do it.
Yeah, I love it. And, a couple of frameworks that I can add to this. So the first one is ACE. So one of the frameworks we teach is called audience, content, and execution. And what we always start with is, who is your audience? And so when telling a financial story, for example, is it sales? Is it marketing? Is it somebody who's more senior? Is it another finance professional? And if you're starting with, okay, what is in it for them, right? There's an acronym, WIFT, what's in it for them? If you really, really start with that, then you can create C, which is the content within ACE. That's interesting, insightful, impactful. And last but not least, the E in the ACE is execution, meaning your body language, your energy, your presence. And just as important as the content itself, it's your ability to communicate it with energy. And most people will pay attention, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, to your body language and see how much conviction does Ron have or Paul have in trying to sell this recommendation. And we're not saying it has to be loud, it has to be authentic, but with presence, right? So that's one. And then bluff is the other one Paul likes talking about, which is bottom line upfront. And when you sharpen your communication, especially in this world where everybody's got their phones beside them and is scrolling constantly, how do you interrupt and with presence say, here's something that's worth listening to, right? Which is really powerful. So storytelling, life skill, business skill, and really is instrumental in rising up the career ladder.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I appreciate you sharing bluff and ace. And just gonna stop here and just we got one more we're gonna go through. Got an offer, and we're gonna open it up for some questions. We'll probably finish a little early today, but I just want to ask now, any questions about what we've talked about today? And I think what we'll do here is we'll take a minute, and Mo had asked a question. I think we'll address this here before we get to the last one. Says, can you touch on jumping to a different company? My company tends to outside for director or VP level, so I don't see value spending my entire career there. The reality is, Mo, most people jump companies. Nothing wrong with it. And now, jumping company for the sake of jumping company, I would caution. Doing it too often, I would caution. Like you see people that consistently have every 18 months on their resume. That often makes people a little nervous. Doesn't mean you can't do it. Doesn't mean you can't be successful. But be intentional of, why am I looking at other companies? Is it I'm not happy? Is it because I think there'll be more opportunity? And what does that advancement mean? Is it just about money? Is it about growing and challenging yourself? Is it, I'm stagnant? Because they're going to ask those questions in the interview process. They're really going to want to understand you. And the better you've thought about it and the better you have an answer, the more prepared you are for switching companies. But be prepared to switch companies. The reality is most people not only switch companies, but switch careers at least once. I've had 3 careers. I started out as a procurement specialist working for the government, went back to school. Then I did, financial reporting. I was really kind of an analyst. FP&A. Then I moved into FP&A. I was more of a business analyst. And today I do training. Yes. Am I still connected to FP&A? I am, but I don't do day-to-day FP&A. I can guarantee you I'm not doing a variance commentary on my budget each month. I'll admit I don't have a near as detailed as the budget as I did for work. I'm a business of one. I don't need that. And so careers change. Be more than prepared to switch jobs. In fact, expect it to happen, whether it's intentional or sometimes forced upon you. But odds are you will switch during your career, and nothing wrong with that. Any thoughts you'd add, Ron?
Yeah, no, I have a lot of thoughts on this one. So I think the framework I use is when I'm at a company, am I still learning? Right. And so, for example, I worked at Kraft Foods for 15 years and I probably did 6 or 7 jobs. I had 3 or 4 promotions. That was a company and culture that was well set up to keep people for the long term. And I actually was quite happy. I learned so much. I got lots of promotions. I did lots of lateral roles, which were quite valuable as well. So that's where the learning comes into play to say sometimes a lateral role can give you the knowledge that maybe a year or 2 years from now, you can get a big promotion, whether it's internally or externally, would be powerful. And then what's interesting is Kraft was one of those companies where the CFO of Kraft Canada was always an external person from a different country. So you may hit a ceiling like that, and then maybe that's the time to jump to a different company if you've learned what you can learn. And at the same time, when I went to all the other companies I worked for, back to Paul's comment, after Kraft, I ended up spending about a year to year and a half at all the other companies. And then I got to the point where that became a big question. Hey, Ron, are you in this for the long term, or are you just going to be hopping around like you've been doing for the last little while? So it is a bit of a balancing act, Mo. And I think it's a fantastic question. And it's about being very intentional with whatever question is important to you. For me, it's, am I still learning? And then finding the right amount of time to stay so you don't get painted like I did when I was hopping, right? I truly was hopping from company to company. So it's a very nuanced thing, but it's a great question, Mo. Hopefully we've answered your question.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ron. It is very nuanced. And I love am I still learning? Am I still progressing? Am I happy? I think
Yes, I
those are
like
some
that.
of the fundamental. I think, and when I say happy, it doesn't mean, do I love everything I do at work? Because we don't. That's reality. Nobody loves everything they do in their job. Could you love it on the whole? But in general, do you feel happy, progressed, fulfilled, whatever those words may be? I think that's, you got to remember that's one of the primary things. That's not always the deciding factor and the only thing. But I would caution anyone to not let it be just about money. Usually that will result in misery. I mean, I had a situation where I received an incredible offer financially and I turned it down because I wasn't happy. And I realized that wasn't going to change anything. It wasn't going to make me excited on Monday to go to work.
There you go.
All right. So this last one, and we talked a little bit about it before. I kind of covered a little bit under 6. I skipped ahead, but learn to influence without authority. You don't have to be the king or queen as in chess. A pawn occasionally can help capture that king. So, Ron, how did you influence without authority, my friend?
Yeah, and I like having this as number 7 because I think it brings all of them together, right? And I think in order to be able to influence, you have to learn the business very well. You have to build relationships. You have to be good at networking. You have to be good at listening, all these skills that we talked about. And there's a cool example in the book you mentioned, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that is really impactful, where there's this business tycoon and there's a huge lineup of people out the door to see him. And somehow this student just was able to wiggle himself in. He got to the person's admin assistant, and she let him in where she doesn't usually, because he was good at talking to different people. And then he went in there and he did a very simple thing. He just asked that person, "Hey, tell me a little bit about your cabinets," or something to that effect. And he ended up getting a very long meeting and ended up actually working for the person. So it's a bit of an interesting example to say, within a company, are you building the right knowledge first, relationships, taking initiative, and then again being strong with that storytelling, communication, and providing recommendations? That becomes really, really powerful.
And I want to close with one thought, not so much number 7, but kind of in general. This is our last one. We're going to wrap up here in a minute. When Ron mentioned the guy got a meeting, right, and ended up a job. If you get the chance, a really good book to read, and I know it's one Ron likes, is The Third Door.
Hmm.
There's always another way. And I shared this earlier where I said, look, I couldn't get a job with these companies. You know, one of them I'd applied for. Now I've had multiple of these type of companies. Some of them even asked me, hey, would you be an advisor for my company? Would you do this? You know, trying to hire me. And it's because I created the third door. And what I mean by that is, you know, I went out and started talking about FP&A software, and they started coming and finding me. I get emails from CEOs on nearly a weekly basis asking to meet with me. And now it's come to the point where there are even some global. I even get now, hey, marketing, go find this person. We should work with him. And that's all because I found a third door. It came through brand and establishing myself as an expert in something that 3 years ago, nobody would have seen me an expert in. And so just always remember, there are unique ways to get those opportunities you want, where you can still be authentic, still be real. So don't be afraid, wrapped in all this, to think outside the box and to take some risks, because you never know what opportunities those are going to lead to. And the worst that ever happens is you fail. Like for me, when I started my business, I remember saying to myself, okay, well, I got a runway for roughly 18 months based on some things that were falling together. And if I can't get a job out of this, it's my own fault. This is no more risk than me working for somebody else. And so, you know, be willing to take risk within reason. Be willing to take control of your career. That's something I felt like I did. And Ron, how was, you know, and not encouraging anyone here to say start your own business, but how did it change taking control of your career, starting your own thing? How was that
Yeah,
maybe
no,
made it more fulfilling and kind of encapsulated
yeah,
what we're talking about?
yeah, no, I think it really is around taking the plunge sometimes, going for it, having having uh the ability to say, look, I'm going to go for it. And, another story that connects to this, and I'll come back to your question, Paul, is I was a manager, and my manager was a senior manager, quit. And on paper, I wasn't quite qualified. So I went to my boss and I just asked, hey, I'd like to put my name in the ring. I'd like to be considered for promotion. And he basically told me, you're not going to get it. But then 4 weeks later, he came to me and said, Ron, we really thought about it and we're going to give it to you. And I think they did the external search and they didn't quite find the right person. So, but I asked, right? And a big part of it is asking. And coming back to your question, I mean, 3 years later after starting my business, super happy, but it took a lot of doing different things, right? How do you now become good at selling? How do you become good at communicating? How do you have webinars like this on a Monday at lunchtime, right? Like it's like, as a business owner, very fulfilling, engaging, but it takes a lot of hard work, which is quite different than the work I was doing when I was internally. But again, back to, am I still learning? Yes, and that's the framework I use.
Love it. So he's still learning because he has me as a partner. He doesn't like to admit that, but that's really what it comes down to. No. So we want to kind of wrap up here. You know, you're more than welcome to send some more questions if you have them. But we wanted to close with an offer. So Ron and I just released bundle. There's 3 modules, about 45 minutes for each module. So about 2 hours of content for business partnering. We cover things that like understanding or building relationships, learning how to influence without authority. Particularly, we talk a lot about KPIs and how those can help you influence without authority, how you can hold the business accountable, and then managing tough conversations. So we have that bundle. And if you use the code webinar20, you'll get an additional 20% off. And so it's at a very reasonable price. I think the list price is $35 on it. That's the code there. We wanted to share that with you. It's just kind of a special offer for anyone who's listening. And then what we want to do is we just want to give you a minute to ask any additional questions you guys have, because we know this is a subject that many people are constantly thinking about, looking for advice, and we'll share whatever we can. But one thing I will share when it comes for the job search, I've been terrible at the job search most of my career. I can remember more than once not having a job for 6 months and a year, trying to find a job. The best thing I did was starting to build a brand. Then all of a sudden I got opportunities come to me. I still remember a couple of years, somebody reached out to me, and I'd been a director, that's the highest level I'd been, and they wanted me to be the CFO of their company. Right. And that came a lot of that came because I had built a network. There were some other reasons as well behind it, but many different opportunities. So putting yourself out there makes a difference, is what I'll say. And we'll just give it 1 to 2 minutes. If there's no questions that come in, we'll wrap up. But I'll go back to that prior slide. If any of you are interested, love you to take that. Also, if you go out there, you'll see it on LinkedIn today. I have another course that I've listed around Excel, but business partnering bundle. We also have our FP&A course. You can find that on my website, and we have more stuff that will be coming over the next couple of months, because our goal, we want to help you guys be better at your job in any way we can. And so that's why we share what we do.
Fantastic, Paul. I think people probably want to get back to their day jobs.
That's what I'm thinking.
Why don't we wrap it? And look, we really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for those who asked questions, Mo. Really appreciate all the input as well there. And look forward to continuing to work with you in these webinars and on LinkedIn. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Do we have to end the stream?